We're so glad to see you tonight. I'm Eva Turner, Director of College Counseling. Even though it is my 20th year working in college counseling, I always feel the sense of excitement on this particular night because it means starting fresh with a new Gilman class, and it's just a very exciting experience. This is our official kickoff on the process, but we know that you've probably been thinking about it for a long time. It's a big transition in the life of a junior or prospective senior, rising senior, and with all transitions, you know it involves a lot of information gathering, it involves timely preparation, a lot of research, and we are dedicated to helping you through every step of that process. We're going to help you with all the technical aspects of it. This is a digital age. All applications are online. We'll help you with Naviance and testing schedules, etc. But we're also going to help you with decision making and goal setting, and as well as we're going to be your cheerleader. We're going to be your advocate. And so for us, it's all about guidance and support through a very important process. And we at Gilman, I think, are blessed to have an outstanding, from my point of view, an outstanding college counseling team. And I'd like to introduce them to you at the beginning. The first one is hovering in the back, Ms. Sawyer. I think we need to say hello to you. Come on, can you come on down and say hello to folks? Ms. Sawyer is all right, yes. All of you will get to know Ms. Sawyer. She is our administrative assistant, and she has been working in college counseling specifically for the last 12 years, but she is a 44-year veteran at Gilman School. So as a result, she knows everything. She knows everything, particularly about this process, and I already know that so many of the juniors understand why she's been so helpful. They've been in to get their Naviance numbers and all manner of things. So we are very blessed to have Ms. Sawyer with us. And then next, I'd like to introduce Anna Follansby. Anna organized this event this evening, and so we are particularly indebted to her for that. But Ms. Follansby is in her 4th year at Gilman, coming from the college side where she worked for 9 years. She teaches sophomore English, advises the Gilman News, and is particularly proud of being intramural wiffle ball coach. So, head coach. Oh, excuse me. I'm so sorry.
That'd be varsity
All right.
wiffle ball.
Mr. Herman is in his 7th year at Gilman. He teaches U.S. history and has the most coveted job in an independent school, assistant JV golf coach. And last but not least, Mr. Baker is in his 9th year at Gilman. He teaches 2 senior English electives, is junior form chair, your boys know him very well, and is one of the varsity baseball coaches. We're all looking forward to working with you. So, let me sit down, and I am going to attend to a few housekeeping items for the juniors. Juniors, you received your college counselor assignment on Monday, and we urge you to set up an appointment with your counselor. This meeting will be an hour long, the first one, and you can schedule the meeting by going online or contacting us directly by email or coming to see Ms. Sawyer, and we'll take care of that. Before that meeting, we want to make sure that you complete your junior questionnaire that you should have. And again, if you don't have that form, just let us know and we can easily let you know how to access it. We prefer that you complete it online so that it's easily typed, so it's more legible because you prefer typing rather than handwriting it. And parents, we have sent you a parent response form as well that we hope that you will fill out. And thank you to so many of you who have already done so and forwarded to us. That gives us yet another perspective on this young man that's your son, and is very helpful to us. And finally, juniors, if you are interested in doing some visiting colleges in the New England area, Mr. Herman and Mr. Baker are conducting a tour this summer to visit lots of different kinds of colleges in the New England area. An email went out to your parents about this afternoon, and we placed a brochure in your mailboxes today as well. So now on to the program. We have three panelists today: Catherine Davenport, the Director of Admissions at Dickinson College, Jeff Schiffman, who is the Director of Admission at Tulane, and Ryan Hargraves, who's the Senior Associate Dean of Admission at the University of Virginia. So now, Mr. Herman, the podium is yours.
I'll start that one.
All right, good evening. Ms. Davenport, Mr. Hargraves, Mr. Schiffman, thank you again for sharing your time and your expertise with us at the evening. Would you please introduce yourselves, your school, and share with us a little bit about what makes your school unique? Ms. Davenport, would you like to start?
Great, thank you. At first I thought he was talking to my mother-in-law. I didn't know she was here. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks very much to Gilman staff for having us for dinner beforehand. It's lovely to be out of committee, seeing people other than my colleagues, who I treasure very much, but at this time of year there's a lot of reading of senior applications taking place, and so to be out of the office for a respite, to be with a terrific staff of people, is really an honor. My name is Catherine Davenport, and I am a Dickinson graduate from the class of '87. I have also been at Dickinson College for 27 years. So as I've just listened to this, I feel very old at this point, but I've also been through the process with my eldest son, who is a college sophomore. I have a junior son, so I know of which all of you are speaking at the moment, and I have a sixth grader son as well. So I have quite a span of educational experiences and opportunities. While my time has all been at Dickinson, I did have 2 years away where I was on the other side of the desk, actually working in a high school in South Philadelphia with 1,000 juniors, trying to assist them with their post-college planning. And the needs are great out there, and you are very fortunate to have a terrific staff here that are knowledgeable and very accessible to all of you with the questions that you have. And I value that because we're a small school. We are a liberal arts college. We're only 90 miles away. I left at 3:15. I was in your parking lot by 10 minutes till 5, and I was not speeding. And I had the great, although I have an awesome car, but that's another conversation. But the opportunities for us to really get to know you are phenomenal. An applicant pool for us is just over 6,000 students. An incoming first-year class is just over 600 students. So for us, when we are getting to know you and your schools, it's very much on an individual level. We are looking for students who want to be in small classroom environments, engaged in dialogue and conversation, and you know what that's like because you live that every day. You know what expectations are from your teachers. Writing, research, discussion, public speaking, good dialogue and conversation. Not always being on the same side of an issue, but really being able to intellectually have that conversation and part ways knowing that your opinion may not have changed, but you relish that dialogue and conversation and learn something from that other person. That's what we expect of our students that come to our campus because our faculty really, really, really like to teach. They are the people leading your classes. We have an average class size of 15 students in a course. It's a 9-to-1 student to faculty ratio. What does that mean? It means that you have to be ready to engage. You have to be ready to be an active learner and an active participant. There is no back of the classroom. You need to be able to speak up, admit when you don't know what you're doing, and seek resources because we have them. The Writing Center, we have a Quantitative Center, we have opportunities for research, advising, publications. There's all kinds of ways that you can enhance the already strong skill set that you have developed here and blossom in some additional areas. And we love to see that transformation with our academic advisors, with our college deans. Seeing you, the person you are as a high school senior applying to us, and the person you are as a senior when you graduate from us in 4 years is really exciting. My two favorite days on campus, I have several, but my two favorite are convocation, when you all arrive and sign in to the college at the start of your first year, and 4 years later when you walk down the stone steps and receive your Dickinson degree, and seeing who you've become as a result. So as a small liberal arts college, we are not all things to all people, meaning we don't have tons of majors. We have 44 majors that we offer. We do have a curriculum that we expect you to explore. We have categories of courses that we expect you to fulfill, so you get that broad liberal arts experience. But there's plenty of opportunity to dive into a field of study like international business and management, or if you're interested in engineering, we don't have engineering, but we have a 3-2 program where you get the liberal arts and the strong sciences mathematics for an engineering program. We're affiliated with Case Western Reserve, with Rensselaer Polytechnic, and with Columbia University for that opportunity. So we are trying to prepare you as educated citizen leaders, which is our mission from our start back in 1783, to prepare you to lead long lives of service and engagement in business, commerce, industry, you name it. So hopefully our time this evening, you'll get a sense of how we do that through the questions we'll answer. So that's just a quick overview of me and the program at Dickinson College.
Hey guys, my name is Jeff. I'm the Director of Admission at Tulane. I'm actually born and raised just a few minutes down the road, born and raised in Bethesda, Maryland, which is about 45 minutes away, or if you drove here at 3 p.m. like I did, about 2.5 hours away, heading on I-95. I'm actually a graduate of Tulane. I graduated with the class of 2005. I had a double major in marketing and management from our business school with a focus on entrepreneurship. I also told my mom that I was going to take the most random minor available at Tulane. Thus, I was a glass blowing minor. So if you are a budding glass blower, we have a phenomenal program for it at Tulane. My connection to Gilman is very long, and I will tell you why. This school holds a very emotional spot in my heart, and that's because my very first job as a brand new person in the real world was as an admission counselor at Tulane. As I mentioned, I graduated in 2005, and so about 6 weeks after I walked across the stage of graduation, I started as a brand new admission counselor. And if you remember your U.S. history at all, I actually started working at Tulane about 6 weeks before Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans. My very first job very quickly became working for a completely closed university in a very much uninhabitable city. As you guys know, a lot of admission reps visit Gilman every year, and my very first high school visit as a brand new admission counselor was to Gilman. And I remember calling Miss Sawyer, and I said, I left my computer back in New Orleans. I don't know if I even have a visit set up with you guys, but could you tell me what time it's at? And she squared it away. I got set up, and this was the very first high school I visited. Needless to say, not many students showed up at the visit that year, but since then, we've very much become a very, very popular place for students, both from Baltimore and from Gilman. So this school means a lot to me. I spent actually 7 years as the admission rep, and then I started actually as July 1st as the brand new admission director at Tulane. So it's been a really cool journey for me to be a part of all of that. I love Tulane, if you can't tell. It's about 6,800 undergraduate students and then about 13,000 total students, so actually we're going size of small, medium, and somewhat large, is medium or large. Private research university, our 5 undergraduate schools, a wonderful school of business, a school of liberal arts, school of science and engineering, a school of public health, and then a really strong program in architecture. I think one of the things that makes us most unique and kind of dovetails with what I was talking about Katrina, and I don't talk about it too much anymore, but one of the reasons why we are so unique is that we are probably one of the best schools in the world for students involved in public service. One of the things that was born out of Katrina for us is that all of our students in their junior and senior year actually design and implement their own public service internship. I'll give you a great example. I just did a site visit last week for our students in our School of Architecture. We have this really neat program called the Urban Build. And what that is Urban Build is usually about 17 students, 18 students who in their second semester of their junior year, for their public service internship, they actually design a model for a home that could be built in New Orleans, very energy efficient. They use green technology. At the end of the first semester, each of those 18 students will actually do a critique of each other's designs, and then they vote on their favorite home. And in the second semester, they go out into the city of New Orleans and they build that winning house. Now, I think it's cool for 2 reasons. What better way to learn about architecture than actually designing a home and then going out and building it and watching something that you yourself have conceptualized come to fruition. But on the flip side, you're a 22-year-old architecture student and you're handing a set of keys over to a family that lost everything 11 years ago and now can finally come home and buy a home at cost because of something you've built for them is a remarkable experience. And I say that because it spans across every major. If you're in the business schools, you might be working with a local nonprofit, helping them with their financial planning. Anything you study, you get to make a difference at Tulane, and that's what we're all about. I always tell prospective students you should never pick a school based on its ranking unless the ranking makes Tulane look good. And then by all means, use that ranking. Last month, the Princeton Review statistics came out, and I always take Princeton Review with a grain of salt. But they had some pretty cool stuff to say, one of the best college cities in America, best quality of life. But the one thing that really resonated with me is they ranked us #1 for the best school in America for students most involved in community service. So I know for you guys at Gilman, a lot of you boys are really involved in civic engagement. That is who we are at Tulane, so much so that it's built into our core curriculum. I'll stop there because otherwise I'll start talking about New Orleans, which I think is the most amazing city in the world, but trust me when I say going to college in New Orleans is like nothing else you've ever experienced. And I'll try to incorporate that into some of my other questions that I answered in a little bit.
All right, good evening. My name is Ryan Hargraves, and I'm the Senior Associate Dean of Admission at the University of Virginia. And Baltimore is actually kind of a home away from home from me. I grew up in the south side of Virginia, but many of my family members are based here. So growing up, I spent lots of summers here eating blue crab sandwiches. I estimate in the car about 150 SK hot dogs between the age of 8 and 14. And I spent lots of time watching the Orioles at the old Memorial Stadium. So go O's.
Did you ever go to a place called Bertha's Mussels as a kid? Does that still exist, Bertha's Mussels? That's where I always went when I was a kid after the baseball games. It was fun.
Okay, that's on the list.
Sorry to interrupt.
No. So I'm here representing the University of Virginia, and we're in Charlottesville, Virginia. So we're 3 to 8 hours away, and as I found out today. And so with that in mind, we have about 15,000 undergraduate students, another 7,000 or so graduate students, and the focus is undergraduate education. So even though it's a state institution, we're distinguished by our founder, Thomas Jefferson, who intended the university to be a platform where students could engage in liberal arts and sciences, develop as leaders, and develop as citizens so they could go out and contribute to communities post-graduation. Even though there is that long-standing tradition, I think the university is very progressive, and we want to bring students in from all over the world. We have, 2/3 of our students are from the Commonwealth. The other third come to us from 49 states, and they represent about 120 foreign countries as well. So they come to us from exotic places like Brisbane, Australia, and Munich, Germany, Cumberland, Maryland, all right? And we want to make sure they have the opportunity to not only learn from the great faculty there, but also from each other. We do have 7 undergraduate colleges. About 80% of our students are in the College of Arts and Sciences, but pretty much all of our students, be they architects, engineers, nurses, in our commerce program, are taking courses in arts and sciences because we want to remain steadfast to our tradition and encourage students to stay across the curriculum. But outside of the classroom, there's a ton going on. Our students operate under the umbrella student self-governance, and so basically outside the classroom, they manage themselves. The student organizations don't have faculty advisors. The honor system, the judiciary system at University of Virginia is completely student-run. And so there are 700 plus student organizations, everything you could possibly think of, to club sports, literary and debate societies, a cappella groups, and if there's not an organization there at UVA students, you can start something new. We had a group of students at UVA about a dozen years ago, for example, who for whatever reason determined that UVA did not have an ample connection to The Price is Right, and so they started the Disciples of Bob Barker. I never went to one of the meetings, but I heard they get together, worship Bob Barker, watch The Price is Right, and then in the spring send a group of UVA students to compete on the college edition of the show. But we have an amazing athletic tradition at UVA as well. Division I, we're part of the Atlantic Coast Conference, and we have some really good student athlete experiences. And so, with that, a lot of, Gilman folks over the years have come and participated in our athletic programs. But, with that in mind, we want you to figure out what it is that you want to do academically and otherwise, and you'll find that the students and the faculty there are to support you in your endeavors. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And now, staying with you, Mr. Hargraves, can you share with us some of the ways that college admissions has changed in the last 10 or 20 years?
The last 10 or 20. Okay, so actually, this is a good question for me because I actually started working I was hired in November of 1999, so students like the last century, all right? And so with that in mind, typewriters were still around. People would still typewrite their application or word process their application. And we were just on the verge of, the internet having a deep impact on our process. But I think the one change that I've seen is, and this is not just a UVA thing, but really about selective college admission, is not only has the number of students applying to college over the last 15 or 20 years grown, but we've also seen, because of, and there are a lot of factors, the common application could be one of them that I would point out, but we've seen the number of applications per student grow. And so there was a NACAC, the National Association of College Admission Counselors, does an annual report, and it was 3 years ago that they said basically for the class entering in fall of 2000, something like maybe 30% of students applied to 7 or more schools, and then they said about twice as many were doing that as of the fall of 2012. And so what a lot of schools are experiencing are record-breaking application pools. And so I think that the one thing that has changed that I have seen in working with students and parents is the anxiety level has gone up. So be it real or perceived, the notion that, I'm not going to get into my top school or one of my top choices has become a reality, for students. And so I think the tension, the anxiety, the focus on college admission has really intensified over that period of time. So that's something that I would point to.
I would say one of the negative things that's changed a little bit is I do feel like there's a real true sense of much of what we think is driven by rankings. I think that in a world of U.S. News and World Report, we are all very much concerned with how strong of a school is. And one thing I always tell my prospective students, especially coming from a school like Gilman, is that there are no bad schools out there. There's only bad fits. And I know that can kind of seem a somewhat trite, but you're looking for a place that's going to be an incredible 4-year experience and be a great fit. Some of the best students out there, Harvard or Yale, might not be a great fit for them. Some of them, your local state institution, would be an amazing experience. So I think, unfortunately, we've started to look a little bit more heavily on the rankings. And I think on our side of the desk, there are a lot of institutions that, for better or for worse, have to play into that in some ways. But I think that certainly you guys have tremendous college counselors here that can kind of help walk you through that whole process. But, think outside the box in this process and don't think too much about what a school is ranked.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I would say definitely information overload and marketing. In the 80s when I started, we prepared the big mailing, which was a catalog, and it had very few, if any, pictures. It was very dense, text-heavy, and it was pretty much the college policies. It did tell you about majors and programs, but not in a, what I would call today, user-friendly type of way. And then with the electronic age really taking over and web pages starting and our ability to capture information and word merge names into form letters or, the dot matrix. Parents, at least nod your head that some of you remember this, the green bar graph paper, right? Because I know the students don't. We've already ascertained I'm well ahead of these two as far as age. So, but, able to capture all of that, it's information overload. It didn't necessarily make us better. It just confused us more, right? Because oftentimes your high school counselor, your guidance staff at a school would name 5 or 10 schools. These are the schools you should apply to. And you did. That's kind of, in the 80s and early 90s. Well, with all this new information and technology, nationally, lots of opportunities. Internationally, lots of opportunities. And so with choice, it didn't become clearer, it became more confusing. And I think that's where our National Association tried to help all of us put good information in front of you, consistent information. So if you were reading about Tulane, you should know that's Tulane University. That should not be 20 other universities sounding like Tulane. The same should be true with UVA and with Dickinson. And it put more back on you all as students and parents to wade through it. And so I think that's where these rankings really, truly got their start. Somebody said, hey, we're going to help you all out, and we're going to simplify this, and we're going to tell you what the best is. but you don't know what that criteria is that's being used to determine the best, right? And so these lists really become overwhelming because it's not tailored to you, it's somebody's decision that this is the best, or these are the better schools to contemplate. And that concerns me, concerns me as a parent, because I don't ever want my own kids to say, I'm too busy to look up that information. If you really need to know and understand, you're never too busy, because that's part of the learning process. So, from a parent perspective, parent to parent, the changes, while they seem useful, I'm sitting up here with my iPad in front of me, while the technology, that's great to have at our disposal, you still have to ask good questions, research good information, and talk about it. Communicate with each other and your great counseling staff, what are you thinking? Because just because someone else says that's good doesn't mean it's right for you. It's not good for you.
We were joking at dinner that there's so many different ways to apply to college now. We're trying to simplify it at Tulane, so we just got rid of single choice early action. But we were saying at dinner, you can apply to this school single choice early action, but that means you can also apply to a public in-state school, provided that their scholarship deadline is before the amount of time, and just the lists of ways that this can be early decision, but that's early action, this is single choice. It's become a somewhat convoluted process. Sorry.
So it's a good transition to the next question or next topic, which is the college search. According to the Department of Education, there are nearly 4,700 degree-granting institutions in the United States. What are the best ways to get to know a college? Mr. Schiffman, can you start off and share some of the ways an applicant can get to know a college? What should he be looking for? And what are some good questions to ask? And how does one make the best use of a campus visit?
Great. So the first thing I would suggest is, even if you're not thinking about applying to Maryland or Hopkins or some of your local schools, go on a visit. For those, raise your hand. If you are a junior, raise your hand if you have visited a college campus before. Okay, good. So a good number. If you haven't, just take a college tour. Take your Saturday, head up to Hopkins and see what it's like. It gives you a sense of what college is like. That can kind of just get the ball rolling. You're going to want to start by asking yourself the big questions. Am I a city type of person? Do I want to be on a college campus that's a little bit more rural? Am I looking for Southern? Am I looking for big state school? Am I looking for small liberal arts college? Ask yourself the big picture questions that can really start to narrow it down. When you get to these college campuses, we expect that you've done your research. So if you're showing up at Tulane and you're asking me, do you have a business program? I'm going to say, we do, but you probably should have researched that before I get there. There's a funny pet peeve in the world of college counseling that a lot of times one of the most popular questions we get, they'll say, they'll come and they'll say, Jeff, do you guys offer internships at Tulane? I have a news flash for you guys. Every school in America offers internships. Another thing we all offer, study abroad. Every single school in America has study abroad. What we like to see is that when you're visiting our campuses, you've asked yourself the big picture questions first. Where do I want to be? What type of school am I looking for? Maybe what majors am I thinking about? Then start to drill down. When you're coming to my college campus, ask my students questions like, if you happen to be going to a college campus and you're sitting on a student panel where you've got students at the front of the room, ask them what they did last night. It starts to give you a sense of what type of campus is this. Is it a Friday night and all 6 kids were in the library? Were they all gallivanting around New Orleans or something like that? Are they all involved in various things? That starts to get a sense, am I going to fit in here? And that's why I mentioned earlier, finding a school that's a good fit. Ask what's the political climate like on campus? Ask what type of services are available for me if I have any type of learning differences. It's types of questions that show that you know what you're talking about. It impresses us because it shows you've done your research. We enjoy it because we're not answering study abroad for the 50th time, and it shows that you're really starting to take those big picture questions and really starting to think, where am I going to fit in the best? Those are the types of questions you should be thinking about and asking.
Yeah, I think that's some amazing advice and that Dean Schiffman gave. And so if we're going to use an analogy here, so that thing about fit is critically important. So colleges are like jeans. You got to try them on, right? And so you guys have like Abercrombie, Lucky, True Religion, Seven. When I was growing up, they had Levi, Jordache, Calvin Klein. I couldn't wear those. I had to go to Sears. They had this brand called Husky. And it's a good fit for me. Thing is, some of you are going to be led by what your peers are doing, right? And just because your peer looks good in Jordache doesn't mean that that's the right fit for you. Just because Tulane's a great fit for your cousin doesn't mean it's the school for you, or if Dickinson is like a great school for you doesn't mean that that's going to apply to your younger brother, right? And so with that in mind, I encourage students to use, following on the advice that Dean Schiffman gave, the my bad approach. So yes, you don't want to go to a college. You don't want to waste your 45 minutes or hour with the admission officer asking questions that you could have easily figured out by looking at your smartphone or your iPad, right? And so I encourage you to use the my bad approach. My bad, my B-A-D-D, my best advice, dig deeper. And I think before you can actually do that, you have to kind of have a sense about what it is that you want, right? So if your thing is the arts, right? And all of us have amazing websites and lots of information there. See if there's an opportunity for you to take an arts tour, right? And so you can start to get into, because we're all going to give you a nice, spiel, general spiel on what the university is about. But anytime you can go ask students what they did last night, if you can go visit a class, right? If you can just go sit in the library, eat in the dining hall, you can start to get past like, oh, they have the number 23 ranked psychology program, and really see if it's going to fit for you. So if you can take those opportunities to use the my bad approach and dig a little deeper, you'll start to get to, oh, actually, this college might be a good potential fit for me.
And two quick pieces of advice. One is, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, talking about engagement and demonstrating interest, but when you do visit these colleges, go on the formal tour. So you might have a cousin or a friend from Gilman that can show you around and take you to a frat party and take you to a football game. Great, do that. But go on the official campus visit. I will say specifically for Tulane, I don't want to speak for my colleagues, but we know when you visited, and we'll talk about that when it comes up to demonstrated interest, but it shows us that you've taken the time to come down and visit us. The other thing is a little more lighthearted, and I actually think there's some stake in it. I oftentimes tell prospective students to observe the shoes that people are wearing on college campuses. Seems weird to say, but is this like a total Sperry wearing type of school? Is it a Chacos type of school? Or all the girls wearing Uggs? I know that seems like a weird thing to say, but observe the type of shoes people are wearing. It tells you a lot about our college campus. And what I mean on a bigger picture is kind of eavesdrop. We mentioned eating in the dining hall. Sit in the dining hall and listen to the conversations that kids are having. Are people having heated debates about politics? Are they talking about Us Weekly? Are they talking about different types of topics? Are they all talking about academics and nothing else? Is it only about the football game last night? What are the conversations people are having? Can you see yourself having those conversations with those kids next year?
Yeah. Oh, and two things. One, especially if you are going to go visit like on your spring break or during the school year, maybe for a few days leading up to your visit, you might just peruse the student newspaper, because I think that can give you a good sense of what's going on the college campus and also institutional priorities. So they always have an article, and look at the actual webpage, because typically what happens is they're rotating stories and rotating photos. But if there's always like an article about research, or there's always an article about service, you can get a sense of what's important there. So I'll stop with that and address my other point later.
I'm not sure where to follow up with Jordache and Sperry.
It's all about clothing, evidently.
The one other piece I would add, though, is some of you will have some very specific things. Maybe you're a student athlete, and so the athletic piece may play a stronger role in your college search process than doing a more general approach to the college process. And as a result, you're looking at Division I, Division 1A, Division II, Division III. I'm in a Division III school, and I will tell you that although we do not offer athletic scholarships, our coaches recruit, and they start the recruiting process early. And so they are informing. They work, with us. We actually have a liaison on our staff who works with our coaching staff to help them better understand the type of student that might be a good academic fit, and they encourage us to take a look at a student that might be a good athletic fit, and it's awesome when the two pieces work well together. It's a little more challenging when one of those pieces is not quite in line with the institution. So we want to have those conversations, and that might inform some of you how you are planning to visit a campus. We are only 90 miles away from here, going up 83. And as a result, this Monday we have an afternoon visit program, because we know there are going to be some students that have the day off. And although our students are not on campus and you can't see us in full swing, our classes don't resume until the 23rd, it is a great opportunity to see a college in a smaller town, not too far away, liberal arts, hear the message. As juniors, you're kind of sampling right now to get a sense of what might I be interested in, and you might find what you thought you had an interest in is not the direction you want to go, and that's good too. It's kind of like doing an internship and realizing, I don't want to do that job for the rest of my life. That's good information before you actually get that job or get admitted and enrolled on that campus. Spend some time. My son liked the idea of going on college visits. When are we going on college visits? When are we planning that trip? Can we take planes? Will we stay? You know, I'm like, no. It's not about the process. Where are we going and why are we going there? And what do you want to learn about it as a result? And eavesdropping is awesome. You know, sitting in the dining area or the student union or, you know, walking along after a tour and just walking around on your own, find out what that campus really feels like and ask some questions. Stop people. You know, ask them a question. See how they react to the conversation that's impromptu and informal. I think that will give you a true flavor for what that place might be like. Eat a meal in the town. Ask the owner of the restaurant, you know, what their perspective is on the community at large. You can gather a lot of great information just by spending a little bit of time and not rushing. I mean, that's my other piece. You know, where we're located in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, you can get to Gettysburg, you can get to Franklin and Marshall, you can get to Bucknell. Do not do all 4 schools in one day because you are literally doing drive-by visits and you're not talking and spending time. So don't try and cram it all in because on the map it looks like you can do that. Make sure you're spending some quality time, even if it's just an info session and a tour, or a tour and a conversation with some students you know, in the waiting room because you don't have a lot of time. But don't just try and stop by for a few minutes and think like, oh, I saw that campus, because you really just stopped through. It was a pass by and you need to spend a little bit more in-depth opportunity.
Let's move on to the way applications are read. So, Mr. Schiffman, will you please share with us the role of the transcript when you read an application?
So talking about the role of the transcript, I think a lot of times when we sit on panels like this, a lot of the questions we get, the answer will always be, it depends. You know, because everything is different from every school. Some schools review things very different from each other. But I will say one of the places where fairly uniform across most colleges and universities is that at the end of the day, when you are applying to college, the transcript will be the most important deciding factor in the application process. Now, it might be more or less important at some of the different schools, but we believe that your academic progress, your 4-year day-to-day work will be the best indicator of how you will succeed in college. Now, again, it's important, and the reason why it is because you put a lot of work into it. What we're looking for is, are you able to find that balance? And what I mean by that is, are you able to push yourself to take challenging courses while still maintaining a strong GPA? Easier said than done, right? We don't want you loading up on all the hardest possible AB courses that Gilman offers and not doing well. I don't want to see you on all the basic level courses and sailing by. It's a personal balance for each student. As you guys are starting to craft these senior year schedules, as you're starting to see what your best academic fit is, there's a school for everyone out there based on your academic experience. One of the most popular questions I get always from a mom is, would you rather my son get the A in the regular course or the B in the AP course? Most common question I ever get. Did I say that right? What we'd rather get is you have the A in the AP course, but that's not always going to happen. So it's the balance of all of that. Oftentimes it's tempting to say, well, you know, we're at Gilman. If he'd gone to public school down the street, he'd have the 4.0, and that's another question where we're like, okay, Mom, chill out. We understand how hard the boys are working here. We know that you guys have a real tough curriculum, and that's our job as admission representatives, that when a Gilman application comes across our desk, automatically we know that it's a challenging curriculum here, and that's something that we're impressed by. It's not going to change your C's to A's, but at least lets us know how hard you are working. There's a lot of factors that go into the application process, but I will say at the end of the day, the most important one is have you been able to successfully find that balance in challenging courses?
I just want to insert quickly here the mom thing that's happening up here. I am a proud mom of 3 sons. I call myself the manager of males. Continue.
I'm going to go through, well, we'll talk about parents in a little bit, right? There's a whole section on parents, so we'll get to that later.
All right, so Ms. Davenport, will you please discuss how your school uses the SAT and the ACT, and also explain your test optional policy?
Absolutely. So I'll start with the test optional piece. I've been at Dickinson, as I mentioned, since 1987, consistently since 92. And in 1995, we were taking a look at our students and performance. And we were saying, you know, is there a correlation between performance in high school with performance, first-year performance in college at our curriculum, and testing? You know, are we really seeing this? Because even if you look at the College Board website or, you know, the ACT website, College Board will definitely tell you statistically that testing does not predict success in the first year of college, right? It really is your performance in high school. And so we were doing a lot of data gathering and assessment, and we did a 5-year optional longitudinal study, basically. And so we told students you can apply with your scores or without your scores. However, if you ultimately enroll and you didn't send scores to us, please send them to us after the fact so we can track this study. And what we learned from that was that it was true that students' testing performance was not a strong indicator of their first year performance in college. What we did see the correlation on, though, was that a student's testing performance did correlate with an LSAT or an MCAT score or a GRE later on, but it didn't line up with their performance in their curriculum. We did see that performance in curriculum in high school, rigor of program, performance in those areas, were better preparation for success and retention, staying after the first year and obviously staying on and finishing in 4 years. So we've been optional since 1995, and our optional policy does not have any caveats with it. If you were to go on, there is a website called fairtest.org, and they try and keep track of all the colleges and universities that have some element of optional testing, and they'll give you kind of what that means. So, you know, for us, if you choose not to submit, we don't factor it in. We don't put a value judgment on that and say, wow, those scores must have been really low, because we have students that are scoring in the 1300s and 1400s, but don't choose to submit those scores. They want us to only consider their other elements of the application, and that's fine. Other schools will say you have to be in top 10% of the class, or you have to have a certain GPA, or you must submit a graded writing sample, or you need to go for an interview with a staff member. So you have to look at what does it mean when a college or university says they're test optional. You know, are there any caveats to what that has to be for you? Obviously, we do have a number of students that submit scores. Probably one of the biggest surprises to me was about 15% of our applicant pool each year was choosing not to submit SAT-1 or ACT scores, now called SAT-R, the redesigned SAT. And you know, 85% of our applicants were choosing to submit their testing. So it was a factor we had at our disposal to consider. Nowadays, you know, with the new SAT, with the concurrent SAT and the ACT, I tell families, you know, take both tests. Take the SAT-R, take the ACT, see how you've done, and make a decision about, does this score result really indicate the type of student and the type of learner that I am? Does it match up with the courses I've had, with the performance that I've achieved? Does it fit with the area of interest I may want to pursue at that particular college or university? And then make the decision, if it's a test optional school, should you submit or not submit? That's a great question to ask during that visit. Or check on the website to see, is there a regional counselor? You know, Nick Shepard is an amazing staff member that works with us who visits the Gilman School. And so he'd be somebody that you could reach out to and ask him some questions about use of testing or not. So from my perspective, and I did this with my own kids, I wanted them to take a couple different types of tests, get a sense of how does this look, how does this fit, and then we communicated and discussed whether or not it made sense to submit those scores if it was an optional college or university. So listen to your counseling staff about recommendations they have for testing, see what the results are, see if that makes sense for you, have that another conversation, and that might also influence the types of colleges or universities to consider. My oldest son was not a strong test taker. I knew that going in. You know, didn't say that to him, obviously, but I knew that going in, and that also influenced then how many schools he might look at that are optional submission versus schools that would require that testing, and what could he do to bolster his application at schools that did require submission if his scores were a little lower. If they had an optional essay, not optional for you, you'll be doing that. If they recommend it, that you come and do an interview, you'll be doing that. So we kind of balanced it out with what influence or weight does the testing piece have at that particular college or university.
Great. And do either of your schools or any of your schools have a preference, SAT, ACT?
No.
No preference.
No preference.
Good. And then, Mr. Hargraves, will you talk about the role of essays and recommendations?
Sure. I was going to actually talk big picture first and say I think we're all in the business of trying to build dynamic, diverse incoming classes. And, as we think about our institutional priorities, be they in the arts or be they in, athletics or in service, we're thinking about the student beyond, which courses have they taken, what GPA have they achieved, what is their test profile. And recommendation letters and essays really start to paint a picture. And I think both are critically important, but I heard a colleague of mine say something very powerful. He said a good recommendation letter, a good essay, it's like medicine for the sick, but it won't raise the dead, right? And so when you think about these things, I want you to think about them as a supplement to the very important areas that my colleagues have mentioned. In particular, Dean Davenport talked about the transcript and how that is so critically important as we try to predict what a student will do. So can they do the work and will they do the work are obviously questions that we're going to try to answer. But really, what will they add otherwise? And often through recommendation letters, and you'll find that the most selective colleges will ask you to do one, if not more, recommendation letters, and sometimes they will give you sort of an option as to who submits those letters, or maybe if you're applying to a top-tier math, science, engineering institution, they may say, hey, we want one from, 2 of your 3 letters of recommendation should come from STEM teachers. And so you should think about who it is that can speak on your behalf. And so a lot of schools will, require that you submit a guidance counselor letter. But outside of that, if you have the option to submit, another letter or a couple of additional letters, I want you to think critically about who knows you, right? And their ability to kind of talk about you beyond what is obvious to us in the other parts of your application. Because so often is the case that students will, try to get recommendation letters from famous people that they know or alumni of our schools who don't know them very well. And so we get these, well-meaning, but for the most part, form letters from the authors. And so in that regard, I would love to see, if you are a great writer, I would love to see, your English teacher, if your English teacher would be willing to write a letter of recommendation on your behalf, or if your life is consumed by debate, if you have a debate coach that you've been working with in high school, those are effective because they can get us into things like, all right, I see that you have straight A's and you've taken these AP classes and you have great testing. So we get beyond you're a great student, and then maybe your teacher says, not only is this a great student, but this is a student who truly loves learning. This is a student who's going to come to your campus and really be an intellectual superstar, and they're going to take advantage of your curriculum. Those types of things are valuable. But I have a question for you. What percentage of recommendation letters do you think are bad? Anybody? It rhymes with hero. Very few letters of recommendation that I've received, and I can't speak on behalf of my peers, are just bad, right? Most letters of recommendation, what's your name, sir? Oh, you're Tom? Okay, what's your name? Thanks, Tom and Tom. Thanks. Okay. So most letters of recommendation sound kind of like this. Dear University of Virginia Admission Committee, I'm excited that Tom decided to apply to UVA. Not only is he one of the greatest writers to ever grace the halls of Gilman, but he's also an amazing student leader. He's in our band program. He's an all-state trumpet player. And he's also on our lacrosse team. They won their 14th straight state title. In addition to being a great student athlete and leader, he's an amazing bridge builder. In fact, he discovered that some of his classmates were struggling with the writing curriculum last year, and he started a writing clinic. They meet Saturday mornings at 7 a.m. He doesn't even charge them. In addition to all that, Tom has also done 167,000 hours of community service, a record in Maryland. You know, I do believe that if you admit Tom to your University of Virginia, not only will he be a beacon of light in Mr. Jefferson's academical village, but he'll go on to represent you well as an alum. In fact, this may sound like a bit of hyperbole, but I believe Tom will be Lieutenant Governor of Maryland one day soon. Please admit him. Like, whoa, right? They don't, yeah, you're welcome. They don't sound like this, conversely. Dear University of Virginia Admission Committee, I'm not exactly sure why Tom decided to apply to UVA. He's in my English class, and not only is he one of the worst writers who I've ever worked with in 25 years of teaching English, but he also has deplorable character. They don't say that, right? So most letters, the worst ones are pretty good, and they get astronomically better from there, all right? So it's critical that that person knows who you are to the extent possible. So it may be effective for you to have a conversation with them or just write a little blurb to say, hey, you know, I am trying to apply to these schools, and you know, this is kind of my goal, so they can be on the same page and they can write substance that will support you. But I do think, you know, some schools will offer the opportunity for an interview, but the essay for a lot of schools will give you really your only opportunity to talk about yourself, to explain who you are, to communicate your thoughts, your ideas, your passions in your own words. And I don't want you to lose that opportunity. And for most students, this is the most excruciating part of the college application process. And some of you, how many of you love to write? Okay, like one person. Okay, cool. All right, so for you, this is going to be great, right? For everybody else, it's going to be excruciating, right? And you're going to have to figure out, what am I going to write about and how I'm going to present my ideas? What I encourage you to do is to think broadly about who you are, big picture. And then you're going to want to, because of the limits of space, 250 to 500 words, I want you to think not major motion picture. I want you to think commercial, right? Don't think Mean Girls or Jaws or Sharknado, you know, or Hidden Figures, you know, Star Wars. I want you to think commercial. Nike, Geico, Jack in the Box, Allstate, all right? I want you to think about things that way because you're going to have a limited amount of space to present ideas that will allow you to show who you are. Now, I can ascertain from, let's say Tom, I'm going to use Tom because he's been a great partner tonight. So let's say Tom is a lacrosse player, and Tom is the captain of the lacrosse team, and Tom is an all-state lacrosse player, and Tom started a nonprofit to help all the underprivileged kids in Hunt Valley. Okay, that's a bad example. To help underprivileged kids learn lacrosse. All right, and so I already know that through that part of the application, I already know that Tom has learned through lacrosse leadership and hard work and perseverance, which is actually the theme of a lot of the application essays that I read every year. We give kids kind of an open-ended opportunity. You know, we don't try to lead students to an answer. So one of the questions that we ask at University of Virginia is not, please tell us about your favorite American president who was in office prior to 1850. Why do you think UVA wouldn't ask a question like that? Any popular answer guesses? Jefferson. Yes. We don't ask any Jeffersonian slanted questions. But in response to the common application prompt, we get several dozen every year with the theme, Jefferson's My Hero. We ask students who are applying to College of Arts and Sciences, what work of art, music, science, literature, mathematics unsettles you, challenge you in what way? And a few dozen times in my career, I have read a student who has written that his favorite piece of literature is the Declaration of Independence, written by Jefferson. And then we say, what's your favorite word and why? And if you think about the hundreds, if not thousands of languages out there, if you include all the various dialects of the major languages throughout the world, you literally have millions of possibilities. And a few dozen times every year, a student will write that his favorite word is rotunda, which is the building that sits at the center of campus at the University of Virginia, which is designed by Thomas Jefferson. And that's not to say Jefferson's a bad topic. Okay, I don't think they're good topics or bad topics. And if you've, since the age of 5, desired to be the next Thomas Jefferson, you have Jefferson wallpaper in your room, you dress up like Jefferson on days other than Halloween, you hand out many copies of the Declaration of Independence at lunch, You started the Greater TJ Society of Hunt Valley. Like, write about Jefferson, right? And send us some pictures. But, because I'm sure you dress up as Jefferson as well. But that doesn't mean you have to, just because you're applying to UVA, you need to write about Thomas Jefferson, okay? You need to figure out what it is that you want to communicate. But think small, okay? Think about the stories that you can tell that illustrate your points. It's fine to have learned leadership and hard work and perseverance because you played lacrosse. But give us instances, okay? Give us defining moments. The people who are reading your application essays are people, all right? And I think the more you can give us a sense of where you're from and who you are, through your words, through the thoughts, if you can sort of paint a picture of your experience, I think you have a better opportunity of connecting with the people who are reading, as opposed to leadership, hard work, perseverance, all right? So you want to show as opposed to tell, because in my opinion, that's just more compelling. And the thing is, the last thing I want to say about your essay, watch your language. And when I say watch your language, I don't mean like clean words, foul words. That's not what I'm talking about. Your words, your language, your voice. An essay, E-S-S-A-Y, expository salient statement about you. Your language, okay? Back in the day when I was applying to college, we had this big dusty book that was in my house called a thesaurus. And I know you guys don't use books anymore, but if you go to thesaurus.com, you can figure out that there are words that you can use to replace the words that you would have used to make you sound perhaps more lofty to the admission committee. So nugatory or obstreperous, words you've never used before. And we see this often in essays. And typically, people who misuse vocabulary, it typically takes them down a bad path. We had a young man about 14 years ago, and I'll never forget his essay. So he wrote something to the extent of, in my early teens, my grandfather tragically perished. As a youth who did not identify with such a cataclysm, I was saturated with various emotions. It gets better. Initially, I was grieved by the loss of a loved one and cannot understand why this calamity had to befall upon my family. I always considered death to have a devastating effect, but was shocked by the emotional strain it places upon an individual. Now, here's the thing. So you guys are, 18 months or so from moving into your first year dorm room. You guys excited? All right, I feel the love. Here's the thing. If you get to your college dorm room and your roommate speaks like that, don't move in. Okay, because you're not old enough to be saturated with various emotions. And I certainly hope you've never had or never will have a cataclysm befall upon you. Be yourself. Be you, your words, your language, your voice. It's not a writing contest. But if you can present an essay or essays that give us an essence of who you are beyond what's obvious, that's all we really can ask for. So good luck.
Great. Wow. Now, will each of you explain your school's early application admission options and share what benefits of applying early are? Ms. Davenport, would you like to start?
Sure. We have early decision, early action, early decision round 2, and regular. So, the old commercial of hold the pickles, hold the lettuce, special orders, don't upset us. You can have it your way when you do the application for Dickinson. Yeah, nobody knows that either. Okay, let's go back to Jordache. We have early decision for students who have done the homework, have done the research, and can really say, this is my top choice school. Not this is one of my top choice schools, but this is my top choice school, and can really state why that is. That's important. That's important that you can talk about that with your family. You can talk about it with your counselor about why would you apply early decision to any school that offers that opportunity. Because what you're doing is saying, if that school offers admission and it's financially feasible to attend, not financially wantable, but financially feasible to attend, I will be enrolling at that school. And so schools that have early decision programs take it very seriously. You are making a commitment, we're making a commitment. If you're not offered admission early decision, you might not be admitted at all, or you might get deferred into a later review round and can be reconsidered at that point in time. So we take it very seriously when we're doing our first round of decisions and all of our decision rounds. But when we notify mid-December It's because we spend a considerable amount of time evaluating all aspects of applications. Early action for us is a non-binding early notification program. I like to think about it as the first round of regular decision, because if you didn't apply early decision, you probably would have been in the regular pool. We've put in this early action opportunity, and we've been doing it for about 18 years now, to give students who it's in one of their top choices, but they're not ready to make a commitment, to find out early whether or not they've been admitted. I used to have Southern California as my travel area, and that worked exceedingly well for a lot of my West Coast students, because if they had not had a chance to visit, and they found out early February that they were offered admission, they had remainder of February, March, and April to make that choice. If you apply regular decision, which is a February 1 deadline, we don't notify until near the end of March, which means that leaves you about the month of April, and if any of you do AP exams or spring sports or spring performances, makes it really hard to get away to visit campuses that one last time. So our early action program actually serves us quite well, and I think it serves our students well. The downside for us is that we have this wonderful 2-week winter break for the administrative staff at the college where we're closed, but modern technology allows me to keep reading when I am home. So, we have to squeeze in about 3,000 applications in an 8-week period, but we do it, and we do it thoroughly, and we do it well. So I always tell students to think about, don't go into your college search process with the idea that you will apply early decision somewhere. Students tell me that all the time. I'm planning on applying early decision. I'm like, oh, that's great. Yeah, I just don't know where yet. Not the best approach to take unless as a junior, that's a goal, is to do early decision, because you're going to approach your visits, the timing of things in a very different way, because you're going to need to know by end of September, pretty much, that you're going to commit to an early decision November deadline, November 1, November 15, because your school needs time to prepare things. You need time to prepare things, to write a really thoughtful essay, to really do a good job in asking for those letters of recommendation, to do that supplemental essay or whatever else might be a part of that application. You want to put your best foot forward. Early action for us has a high defer rate. We don't want to over-admit in early action because we do want to save spaces in regular decision. And so if you get deferred in early action, defer is not deny. Defer honestly means we need more time to assess your credentials. So if you don't get in touch with us after the deferral, highly likely you will not be admitted in regular review. If you do get in touch with us, your regional counselor, me personally, you update information, your chances of being admitted later are actually quite strong, if we can make it work with all the other aspects of our admittance pool. So from my perspective, you have to think about what's the best time for you to be applying to a school, and how does that deadline work at those particular schools. And that's great with your counseling staff's assistance, and using Naviance to be able to track information really helps you stay on top of the process.
So rather than relitigating all that, I'll say we're almost exactly the same at Tulane. Same exact decision plans: early decision 1, early decision 2, early action, and regular decision. We are very heavy on early at Tulane. So about 85% of our freshman class will apply early, not necessarily early decision, but early action at Tulane. And we're of the school of thought that the earlier you apply, the more likely you are to enroll. And that's because you've done your research, you're fairly interested. I will say one addition to that's a great point. If you are deferred from a school, it behooves you to reach back out to that admission staff. And not just, earlier at dinner we were talking about the difference between responding and reacting. Reacting is the day you get deferred, you email the admission counselor and say, yeah, I'm still really, really interested. And that's great, but we deferred 15,000 students. So what's better is to let the dust settle and wait maybe a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks and say, dear Jeff, wanted to let you know I was deferred about 3 weeks ago. I've heard back from all of my other schools. I want you to know Tulane's my top choice. That way I know you've done your research. You really let this kind of marinate for a little bit. We'll talk a little bit in a while about demonstrated interest, but I think that's a perfect time to really let the dust settle, clear your mind, and then genuinely, authentically say, is this still one of your top choices, or is it your top choice? Those students that do that are much more likely to be admitted. To be very frank with you, if you are deferred from a school, and I'm just going to speak for Tulane and maybe Dickinson, if we don't hear from you, we'll assume you've gotten into another school early decision. We'll assume you're not interested anymore. So just for a couple of us, if you are deferred, we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, and University of Virginia for first-year students offers two options. One, an early action option, which is an unrestricted process. You apply by November. We will inform you of your decision in late January, and regular decision. So the January 1, April 1 notification. And the only advice I would give is for those of you considering early versus regular, if that's the case, if you're looking at a place like UVA, I would say that there is no real advantage. Typically, slightly more students apply early than regular, but we don't have any caps. And so with that in mind, I would say you need to kind of think about your own progression. And so if you're a person who perhaps got off to a slow start in high school, but you're doing really well now, and you really think your first semester senior grades are a tipping point, then maybe you can go regular versus early, but there's no pressure from our end.
And I will say, I know we've said this a couple of times, but you all have tremendous resources here at Gilman. I mean, of all the schools that we recruit from, there's not that many high schools in America that even have nights like this. So you have 4 people that are very much going to go up to bat for you in this process, but they are familiar with our schools. They can say, hey, if you're thinking about Tulane, you really want to apply early. Or if you're thinking about UVA, you might want to wait for your first semester grades. They have a tremendous amount of information. That's why you say it depends. Every school is different, but you've got 4 people in your corner that know exactly how this process works.
Staying with you, Mr. Schiffman, can you describe how your office defines demonstrated interest and explain the role it plays in making admission decisions at your school?
Sure, and I will be very honest about this. So I think the word demonstrated interest, the words demonstrated interest have become such a buzzword. You've got to demonstrate your interest. You've got to do this. You've got to make sure that you're interested, that these schools know about it. And some schools, I have a colleague at Boston College, they don't care. They couldn't care less if you visit, if you interview, none of that matters. Some schools are in the middle, and some schools are maybe a little bit more towards Tulane, where it is a part of the process. Now, at Tulane, we don't call it demonstrated interest. What we call is engagement. And what I mean by engagement is at some point in this process, have you engaged with us in the admission office? That doesn't mean you have to do 9 different things. You don't have to email me, twice a week and ask about internships and study abroad. You don't have to do all these different things, but at some point, engage with us. How many high schools visit Gilman how many colleges visit Gilman every year?
Over 100.
So about over 100 universities are visiting you guys every single fall. I know you guys have AP Calculus, you have things you need to be at, but if you can, the schools that you know you are very interested in, take the time to go hear that admission rep. There's a lot of different ways you can engage with the school. I think the idea of demonstrated interest has been overused, and I think now students feel like they have to jump through all these hoops and they have to do all these things. What I want is an authentic, organic engagement with us. So if there's schools you really want to go to, then go to the college information sessions. If you can make it down for a visit, do it. At some point in time, email your admission rep and just introduce yourselves. And if you have a question you're really interested in, let us know about it. I say with engagement and demonstrated interest, quality trumps quantity. You don't have to do all these things. You just have to have 1 or 2 things that let us know we're high on your list. The best way to do that, or one of the best ways we can do that, is at Tulane and at a lot of schools, there's what's called the optional statement. And we've done a great job talking about the essays. Well, a lot of schools also offer optional statements. Ours at Tulane is, why are you applying to Tulane? Hypothetically, if I have 2 students left on my desk, they're both from Gilman, they're both tremendously strong, great grades, great recommendations. One took the time to write an optional statement about, our biomedical engineering program and how they love the city of New Orleans and how they know how dedicated we are to service. Other student didn't write it at all. 100% of the time, I'm picking the student that took the time to do that optional statement. You have a chance to really talk about what makes you a good fit for our schools. Why do you want to be here? So if you're feeling like you're forcing yourself to demonstrate interest, or you feel like you're forcing yourself to make yourself known, then you should really question if that's a school where you want to be at. Demonstrated interest should come naturally to you. I don't want you to feel like you have to do certain things. Just think about, how can I engage? How can I make myself known that this is a place that I'm somewhat serious about? Don't overthink demonstrated interest, but at some point, quality, remember, over quantity, engage with us at some point in the process.
So Tulane tracks demonstrated interest and engagement. How about the other schools?
We do, and I'll add one thing to that. I hesitate to use the word track because we do, and I'm going to be very honest with you. There are some schools that will track it down to the point where they can see if you open our emails, and that's almost Big Brother-esque, but that is, we talked about how there's a mania in this right now, and that's schools that have that many applicants. We track it in the sense that we know what you've done. Like I said, when I read your application, I know if you visited campus. But at no point am I going to have an application on my desk, and if they didn't visit, well, they're not admitted. Like I said, it's just one part of this whole process that comes together. Again, the hypothetical situation with 2 essays is very hypothetical, but it is tracked, but it's not as important as your grades or the scores or all the other things we're talking about.
Yeah, we know the database management system that we have. I mean, I can tell when I've sent you an email if you've opened it, kind of scenario. And, you know, I'm not using that for or against. You know, I can even tell what kind of device you opened it on. You know, I mean, that is a little bit creepy. And so we're constantly, you know, saying just because we have the ability to do that, do we need to do that, right? Just because we can doesn't mean we should. And I'm always using that information as we're evaluating every step of our process in communicating, because we're real people, you're real people. We respect your privacy for information. You know, I would say that when we do what we call school checks. So Nick, as an example, talked with Ms. Turner about, you know, students who are seniors that have applied to Dickinson so far this year and how they're faring in our early action process. And we would approach it more that way, being able to say, well, here's how we're reading this student. Here's what we know about this student. And by having that dialogue, we might learn a little bit more information that the application didn't bring to life, which can be really helpful. You know, now is the time when you're doing the applications. Make sure you're being thoughtful about what you're sharing with us. Don't leave it up to those letters of recommendation. I mean, that's where I'm not so much, you know, how many times have you done this or how many times have you done that, and forming a mathematical calculation about probability of enrollment and engagement. I'm not doing that because I want to know what is it about who you are and the person you are becoming, and why might you work well at our campus? What might we do for you, and what might you do for us as being a member of our community? And those are things that you can't always quantify. I'm Dean of Admissions, but I also have a regional territory, you know, where I travel and I do work with those students and counselors from that market. And I do that because I want to stay very connected to the student. I don't want to be removed to doing, you know, upper decisions without that day-to-day interaction and contact. That means a lot to me and informs me about the work I do on a daily basis. And you know, the types of experiences I want our students to have on our campus. So while we can do that, I don't want to go down that road of using mathematical quantifications for how many messages you've opened, how many times you've looked at a decision. You know, it's not useful information, even though we can quantify it.
Yeah, we don't use interest, demonstrate interest, or engagement as a major part of our decision-making process.
Thank you. We're going to have 2 final questions, and then we'll open the floor up to do some questions. So final thoughts here. What are the most outrageous or most prevalent myths that you've come across in your time working with prospective students and families? And then at the same time, perhaps you could offer the appropriate role for the parent in this process.
Well, one thing I'll say about, we were talking about the mania of this whole process. One thing I will tell you is that there's this myth that every single student that we're looking for has to be a well-rounded student. Every one of you've got to be well-rounded if you want to get into college, and that's not true. What I'm looking for and what we're looking for is to build a well-rounded class of students. So what that means is we need artists, we need musicians, we need people that are passionate about service, and people that are going to play on our football team. You don't have to do all of these things. You know, I get resumes that are like 7 pages long of every time you've donated blood and done a walk around the park for a charity. Your resume should not be longer than our resumes as professionals are. And so what I want, what are the 1 or 2 or 3 things that you love to do and that you're passionate about doing? You know, if it is lacrosse, if that's the big thing, that's fine. If your resume has 1 section for a class and then two other things, it doesn't have to be this laundry list of activities. So don't feel like you have to be this Renaissance man that does everything. Pick your passions and let us know what you're going to do, what you love to do, and what you'll probably keep doing when you get to our college campuses in the fall. That's my myth.
Yeah, brief comment, and then I want to hear from the manager of men.
Manager of males.
Excuse me, manager of males, sorry. So I think that's actually a great point, and what I want to say is that so often is the case that students think we have, service requirements or, minimums in terms of testing, and that's rarely the case. And so you can trust that we'll go beyond, your ACT composite score or your GPA and really gain context for who you are, the environment you come from, and what you're going to bring to us. So that in mind, I would say that the thing you want to do is just really focus in on who you are, because I think we as college universities, baffle you. So, how many of you have received like brochures in your mailbox or in your email from college universities? Some of you started receiving stuff, emails, newsletters, and you'll notice that a lot of the things you receive are eerily similar, right? Like all of our brochures have diverse pictures of students. So you see like a black kid and a white kid, an Asian kid, and Latino kid, and we'll be in a circle.
Under a tree. Oh, they're always under a tree.
Always under a tree.
The quad.
The faculty members in a rocking chair. We're holding hands. Come be diverse with us, right? It's always sunny, like Northwest Alaska State, 75 and clear, right? And you also notice that, there's someone doing something artistic or athletic, and it sort of presents this well-rounded perspective. But don't lose yourself in the process. And so I think that, when we're talking about myths, is that students, because they adhere to, I need, this test score, or, I need to have a certain number of service hours, a lot of times they limit their options. And so I'm just really just following along. But it's important that in this process, you be yourself and you present your best self, as opposed to trying to appeal to what you think it is that we want.
Yep.
And I'm going to speak to the parent in the process.
Mom.
The PIP, the parent in the process. It's easy sometimes for us as parents to just take control and make it happen, right? Because I know as a mom, there are moments where it's like, you know what? If I just do this, I will A, do it right and correctly the first time, right? Because we know we can do that. And B, I can get it done more quickly and more efficiently. But guess what? We've already had our opportunity, potentially. I'm first generation college, so I had my opportunity to get to go to college. And the best thing I can do for my children is to help them learn how to do it for themselves. Because I'm not going to college with them. And actually, they're not coming to my college. So we have this great understanding of finding oneself and being able to learn how to do things. I want my sons to fail. I want them to experience lack of success. Fail's a harsh term, isn't it? Who wants their child to fail? But I want my sons to recognize they're not always going to have the right answer. They're not always going to do the right thing at the right time. But if I can help them recognize small mistakes can be corrected and perhaps bigger mistakes can be avoided because I've had the smaller mistakes to learn from, that's important. So often, I used to say when I was, before my first was born, so he's almost 20, that I went to work every day to learn to be a better parent because I met so many families coming through our door to interview. And the people that were not always welcoming and appropriate with our wonderful recruitment support staff team, but became very welcoming and friendly the moment they met the admissions officer, was a real challenge for me because we are all on the same team in my office, and if you work with me well, you're going to work with everybody well. If you're not working with me well, I don't want you to treat somebody else inappropriately. So my children have had the opportunity to see life as it is, and hopefully learn from that and to ask me questions about that. And I've always tried to resist the urge to swoop in and fix it or make it better. Now, parents, you know the big mistakes versus the little mistakes, right? So you need to be a good judge of the big mistakes because, you know, like when I was driving here today and that big semi almost hit me, that's a big mistake, right? But I have more experience driving than my 16-year-old who's going to take his driver's test next Tuesday. He may not have reacted the same way. I would have saved him from that, or I would have tried to. But these other mistakes where it's hard. I don't want to stay in this class. It's really hard. Guess what? Hard's good to learn now because you'll be better prepared for that harder college course. I don't want to stay in this class. The teacher and I don't get along. That never would happen here. Stay in that class. Persevere. Figure it out. Find a solution, because you may not have that choice in college when that faculty member is teaching the only class you need for that major, unless you decide not to major in that subject. So as parent to parent, we need to be able to say, I'm stepping back, not stepping away completely, because trust me, I know about deadlines and projects and all that kind of stuff getting done at the last minute, but I try and help guide and direct and inform how to do things in a way that you can not make it manic, reduce the anxiety, not create more crazy where crazy doesn't need to exist, because this process can feel so overwhelming at times that the family begins to disintegrate a little bit, and then we all know communication stops, and then things just don't work well at all in all aspects of our life. So keep it funny. You heard humor here tonight, right? You heard us talking about fun things and difficult things. We need to think about this in the reality area of, hey, if I don't get into Tulane, I'm going to get into UVA. I don't get into UVA, I'm going to get into Dickinson. I don't get into Dickinson, I'm going to get into you name it, right? There are good choices and options for all of you. You just need to be realistic and thoughtful and not go crazy, okay? I don't really have anything else to say.
I would say I think that's a really good way of putting it. My favorite quote is a John Lennon quote, and he says, "Everything will be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end." So there's going to be some challenges through this whole process. What I will say about the role of parents, and this is the way I can boil it down to brass tacks. Parents, you do not want to be more memorable than your students in this process. And you laugh, but it's true. We have parents that are tremendously memorable for all the wrong reasons. And for us, we ask ourselves, is this a mom or dad that we want to be a part of our Tulane family for the next 4 years? And beyond. I want just a quick, we're going to do a quick exercise here. I want all the parents in the room to say with me on three. We're going to say the word we. 1, 2, 3, we. So I want you to try to remove that word from your vocabulary during this process. And here's why. I have moms that come to me and they say, well, we're taking AP Calculus, or we're taking the ACT on Saturday. No, we're not. I know we collectively are, but when you come to me with that attitude, I'm thinking, okay, where is this? What I want is to meet your son, and I want to know what he will be like when he gets to my campus in the fall. Is he going to be the type of kid that stands up in class and talks about what he's passionate about and engages with our faculty members and takes ownership over this process? I was working yesterday, and I got a call from someone, and it was this girl. She was like, "Hey, this is Janie. I'm an applicant." I'm like, "Mom, it is 2:10 in the afternoon. I know this is the mother calling." She was actually pretending to be the daughter. And this is a horror story, but this happened yesterday. I want you guys as parents to have a role in this process, and that is important. You're footing the bill for this. You should be a role in this. But remember, this is your son's first true chance to be an adult. For me, I am a true millennial, born and bred millennial. Last week, I had a big milestone. I bought a car. Little did I know it would take 7 hours to buy a car. First thing I did before I went to buy this car from the Jeep dealership, I called my dad, and I was like, "Dad, what do I do? How do I buy a car?" And that's because for me, that was the life I'd had growing up, was my father was such a big part of it. And what you want to do is find the balance, just like we've been saying all night. Be a parent in this process. Remove the word we, but be there when you need them most. I personally am not a parent, so I think you've got some great advice up here, but it's about having them take ownership over this process, being there when you can be, and letting them really have this first major step in their life.
You're like the wisest glass blower / dean of admission I've ever met.
Meanwhile, I'm director of admission, but I can't buy a car without my dad, so go figure.
Dean Davenport, Dean Hargraves, Dean Sifman, thank you. Thank you again for being here.
Great job, you guys. We should start like some sort of like improv group.
Oh my God. It'd be great.
And now I will open up the floor to questions if anybody has any. Yes.
So I just want to address your question. And you said it's Isaac? Yeah, so addressing inconsistencies and just kind of giving us a better picture of who you are inside and outside the classroom. And just generally, I want you to think outside the box. So, some of you have a very traditional, we'll use extracurricular activities as the platform for this, but you may have a very traditional list of extracurricular activities. So let's say you are the captain of a team, you're in the band, you're also on debate, you do traditional community service. But maybe, some of you don't go to Gilman, or you do go to Gilman and you have an hour-long commute to get here. We want to know about that. Maybe you're the oldest of 5 siblings and you spend 8 or 10 hours a week doing childcare. Let us know about that. Or you have to work a job to support your family. All these things will help us get an idea of who you are. And if there are gaps there, hey, my first year of high school, my parents got divorced, it was really rough. You want to give us a little bit of a picture of who you are, because then if we see academic decline or we notice that you don't have that many extracurricular activities, we can say, you know what, this student doesn't necessarily have the traditional sort of application, but this student, because he's the oldest of 5 siblings and took care of, young people and traveled to school, an hour each way, this student has determination and they have, empathy. And those things are very important. So to the extent possible, give us those details.
I'll just add 2 very quick things to that. One, we love a job. I feel like gone are the era when high school students had a summer job. I worked at Pier 1 Imports. It was a nightmare. But, it was something that I put on my resume. And when I read an application, we get kids that can go to amazing service trips in Fiji, and they've done these tremendously cool internships in New York City. But some kids are Starbucks baristas. Mm-hmm. And some of the most interesting kids have learned about resilience and grit and time management from having a job. So don't think of extracurriculars just in the traditional sense, like captain of the debate team. There's a lot of ways you can make yourself that well-rounded class of students by what you're passionate about. 2, again, great college counseling staff. Talk with your college counselor. If there's a blip in your experience, if there's a story behind your grades, if you had a concussion in football and missed 6 weeks of class, your college counseling team is going to let us know in their relative recommendation, and that's where we're going to start to get that additional information. So have those conversations about who's going to be talking about what in the process.
In the back.
Good question.
Yeah, I have kind of a general thing on GPA, and then I'll answer a specific question. We are receiving applications from thousands of high schools throughout the nation, throughout the world. And so the thing about a GPA is it really has a context, and that context is within your school. So since I've worked in admission, I've seen GPA systems proliferate from 100-point scales and 4.0 and 5.0 and 4.0 weighted and 5.0 weighted to 6.0, 7.0 scales, 9.0 scales, 12.0 scales. Some schools give grades, but they're not like ABC. They're like H, V, smiley face plus. All right. So Purnell, if you get a smiley face plus in calculus, you are on your way. But the thing is, we're trying to and our job is to figure out, okay, Gilman offers this curriculum, so even classes that aren't necessarily, AP are really challenging. And, when you go to college admission information sessions, a lot of college admission officers will say, well, 93.1% of the students who enter this university are in the top decile of their high school class, which to me is okay. It is, right? Like, so if you go to a high school where 100% of your classmates go off to a four-year school, okay, that's different than if you go to high school where that number is 20%. Or maybe we get a lot of applications from a student or from students who go to a school I won't name. It's in Alexandria, Virginia. It's a math and science magnet named after the person that founded UVA. And so that school, out of about 450 students, about a third of them are National Merit semifinalists. And they don't send us ranking class data, right? But we know based on the number of students in the class and the number of students whom apply that we're going well beyond the top 10% of students because those students are well prepared. So what I want you to think about is, what your GPA means at your school. Are the courses that you are taking a good prep? And I think, we try to be consistent from year to year at a specific high school. So like 91 point something, 91.2 means something here. It may mean something different in another school. But we're going to work with your school, your high school counseling office. You have amazing counselors. So we'll get a context of, what that means for us in our process.
And I'll say a real quick answer to that is it depends. So say you're applying to NYU and you're specifically interested in arts or Tisch, they might very much look at what classes have you taken in the arts. You might be applying to Georgia Tech. They want to know that you're taking AP Chem, AP Calc. At Tulane, we don't care. And I say that because about 80% of college students change their major at least once. So we don't think the major you're applying with might be the one you graduate with. So as such, we don't think you should have to take specific classes for it. Again, it depends on the school you're applying to that.
Yeah, we do not admit to a particular department or program. We admit to the college, and then once there, you have the opportunity to determine your major. And the same is true with GPA. GPA doesn't mean anything to us if we're not looking at you in light of your school and your program of study. We do not recompute a grade point average because to try and mesh out what everybody would be on average tells us nothing about the essence of the program of study that you've had. So we are looking at students from Gilman, but I can't even say we're directly comparing one to the other unless it's as we move later in the application review process for the few remaining spaces that we may have available to admit.
Yeah, and that's another point I wanted to make to parents, because I get this question a lot is, do you guys have quotas, right? Is there a Gilman quota? And I'm like, yes, duh, there's like 7 people that can be admitted. No, not at all. No quota. The thing is, so going back to what Dean Davenport said, we try to be consistent, and we know, like I said, what the curricular opportunities are, what student performance means in context. And there's a school in California that I read for, and in 2 years, they sent us 18 and 14 applicants respectively. And in the first year out of 18, we admitted 3 students. And then in the second year, when they sent us fewer applicants, we admitted 8. And so it's like that group of students who are applying the second year, it was just it was a strong group, and so we admit a lot of students. So, don't think of it in terms of minimums or maximums in terms of, well, if, 8 kids from Gilman apply, like that ruins my chances. Like, we're going to really focus on you and what you have done in the context of the school.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. And, all of us have been in the business for a long time, but we learned a lot tonight. So thank you. Really appreciate your candor, your knowledge. It's going to be great working with you.
Oh, can I say something?
Yeah.
So her son is at UVA, Hal Turner. He's one of the great student affairs professionals, and he's like, I've done a rating. He's like one of the top 3 sharpest dressers there. Thank you for preparing it.
What a nice thing. Thank you. With that in mind, let's go home. We will hang around for a little while. If you'd like to ask any specific questions, have a good evening.
He went through the whole Rolling Stone thing.
Exactly. Yeah, so he had a rough, that whole, all the dean of students